Hello and welcome to Just One More Watch. Welcome to my annual review, if you see what I mean. My top 5 watches or watch related things from 2020 and my bottom 5 watches or watch related things from the last 12 months. But before I get into all of that, a couple of heartfelt messages from me just to you. I hope you all have a fantastic time over the next couple of weeks. I hope you all have a safe and happy holiday. 2020 has not been the best year on record, more on that later. And I think everybody's really looking forward to a bit of a break from the madness, a bit of time off, and hopefully spending some time with family and friends who we may have not spent as much time with as we would have liked over the course of this year. So please stay safe, enjoy the holidays, don't drink too much, don't eat too much, and I look forward to seeing you all again on the channel in 2021. Talking of which, 2020 has been a great year for Just One More Watch, so thank you, a heartfelt thank you to all of you for that. I lost my job this year, like a lot of you, I'm sure. I haven't worked at Sydney Opera House since March, and I'm not sure when I'll be back. Perhaps next March there'll be some shifts available for me there. So I have been relying on my income from the channel, Google ad revenue, affiliate revenue, and so on, and none of that would happen if it wasn't for you subscribing, for you watching, for you commenting, for liking and disliking, and so on. So thank you very much. I've gone from 110,000 subscribers to 170,000 subscribers at the end of the year, which just blows my mind. I thought this channel would tap out at 20k subs. I never expected any of this, but it's all been great, and I've got you to thank for it. All right, let's get on to the top 5, bottom 5. Let's start with the 5 positives before getting into a proper moans and niggles section a bit later on. And why not start with the watch on my wrist? If I told you could get a 200-meter rated dive watch, automatic movement, screw-down crown, original design, a stack of history and heritage behind the company, a big well-known brand, and it would have a 10-year service interval on the movement, oh, and it's a GMT, all for less than $100 US, you would think I was mad. I'm not mad, comrade. I just buy Vostok. The Vostok Commanderski GMT, definitely one of the big value picks that I have reviewed over the course of 2020. So much so it made it straight into my top 15 ultimate value watches that I made mid-year for my 500th video anniversary. Vostoks are not going to be for everyone, I appreciate it. There's no such thing as a middle of the road Vostok. The styling on all of them is a little bit extreme. Personally, I don't find this one too bad. I can cope with this one very nicely, especially when it is so feature packed for such a small outlay. $100 for all of that is outrageous. Okay, it's an acrylic crystal, it's not sapphire or anything like that, but a bit of polywatch, you'll be able to buff out any scratches over the course of the lifetime that you will have this watch. They're genuinely super reliable, rugged and robust. I often refer to them as tractors. They're a little bit agricultural, but they just keep on ticking. So if you haven't already got a stack of Vostoks in your collection, and you can find one of these GMTs because they do sell out quite quickly, I highly recommend adding one to your collection in 2021. Next up, the Seiko SKX is dead. Long live the Orient KAMASU. I reckon the KAMASU is now the default choice if you're looking for a big brand dive watch and you've got around $200 US to spend. Who knew that the natural successor to the Seiko SKX and that particular throne that it used to occupy for many years would not come from within the Seiko stable, but from their sister brand Orient? The Ray and Mako, the previous models, were okay, but they certainly weren't any better than the SKX. I think a stroke of genius by Orient fitting sapphire crystal to the Mako 3, aka the KAMASU. It really has taken one serious step over most of the Seiko competition for even up to $300 US. I think also the colorways available are another interesting option that you don't necessarily get with a Seiko. Blue, green and burgundy, as well as the standard default black. You can also pick one up now in gilt tones, which looks pretty good as well. In-house movement, hacking and hand winding, 200 meters of water resistance, day-date complication. Nice size at 41mm, livable bracelet, and I think quite an attractive looking watch once you get used to the extra details that come with an Orient. It's not a Seiko, you're going to have to get used to something a little bit different, but I think well worth getting used to. Let's see if Seiko will try and reclaim that $200 dive watch crown back from Orient over the course of 2021. I don't think they will. I don't think they want to. I think they're deliberately pushing up market. Maybe the value lies with Orient these days as opposed to Seiko. More on that later. Moving on to one of my best pickups over the course of the year, it's a Casio, no great surprises there, you all know I adore Casio watches. It's a G-Shock, again no great surprises there, I think a lot of people bought quite a few G-Shocks over the course of this year, a little piece of certainty on your wrist in a very uncertain time. I bought two, I bought the Casio Oak, but really that was one of the big hits of 2019. I also bought a G5600E, a watch that I know I will have for life. It's the solar powered version of the classic square G-Shock, and since I've got it, I have worn it a lot. It does everything you expect a G-Shock to do, and I know I will never need to change the battery, meaning the extra outlay is easily justifiable in the long run over the standard 5600. I have already been wearing mine just as it is supposed to be worn. I've been wearing it for sporting activities, when I'm cycling, and also when I'm tinkering around with cars. It's nice when you buy a watch that doesn't cost a fortune, but you know you're going to get an awful lot of use out of it and it's going to be a permanent part of your core collection. That's exactly how I feel about that G-Shock. Number 4, arguably one of my favourite micro brand reviews of 2020, it's the Zelos Swordfish Titanium, a watch that I think ticks an enormous number of boxes and does it all for less than $400 US. I highly doubt this is the first time you've heard of Zelos, certainly not if you're a long-term viewer of this channel. I must have reviewed a dozen of them here by now. Most of those reviews have been favourable. Zelos arguably at the vanguard of the microbrand community, one of the most successful microbrands to have launched over the last 5 or 6 years. They sell now thousands and thousands of watches each year, and they almost universally sell out. They have an ardent fan base, a communicative and available owner, and they still offer outstanding value for money. In spite of their success, they haven't tried to turn that pricing screw over the last 5 years, diminishing the brand's value overall. The Swordfish is probably their most popular line of watches. It was always a big chunky watch with modern styling at about 42mm. They did a 40 which sold out in about an hour, I believe, earlier on this year, and then they did a titanium version of the 42. Super wearable, 135 grams from a big chunky watch, great dial colours, great lume, Seiko movement, giving a compelling package overall. The problem with Zelos though is actually being able to buy the model that you want. They do sell out quickly as discussed. I would recommend joining the Facebook group, signing up for the newsletter and keeping your eyes open for the next launch date of the particular model that you're interested in. A well chosen Zelos though will hold its value like no other microbrand. It might even appreciate if you pick the right colorway. It just shows that microbrands can offer outstanding value for money if they choose to. And my 5th and final outstanding watch from 2020, and I know I'm a little bit late to the party with this one, it's the Hamilton Khaki Aviation Pilot Day Automatic, also known as Matthew McConaughey's watch from Interstellar. This one was all over the YouTubes a couple of years ago, but I took my sweet time getting around to it, and I'm glad I did because it is pretty much perfect. If only they had put some anti-reflective coating on the underside of that sapphire crystal, it would just be a knockout watch. I've spoken about this before, the value for money offered by the bottom end of the Swatch Group ladder, thanks to their economies of scale, thanks to the fact that they own ETA, thanks to the buying power of such an enormous watch company, is outrageous. It is formidable and it is frightening if you're a microbrand going head to head with that, particularly if you don't buy it from your high street jeweler, particularly if you buy it grey market. If you're prepared to go grey and get that extra saving, there is not much that can touch a Hamilton or a Tissot or a Certina at or around the $500 price point. Hamilton, I think, did an outstanding job with the design philosophy of this one overall. They took a Type B Flieger, they modernized it and they dressed it up in just about every single area. The resulting watch is a really compelling everyday wear in a way that your standard Type B Flieger simply is not. 100 meters of water resistance, sapphire crystal, 80-hour power reserve automatic movement, Swiss made on the dial, and from a brand with the history and heritage of Hamilton, all for less than 700 USD. Absolutely outstanding. Alright, enough of the positivity and praise, let's get on to the negatives. This is going to be a 10-minute moan and niggle section, and I'm looking forward to it. The first thing I'm going to complain about is 2020. As discussed, I'm not even going to beat this out. 2020 has been a complete shitter of a year. I don't think anyone has been unaffected by what has gone on around the world this year. Materially, as I said, I lost my job and I know a lot of people have been struggling as well. Mentally, emotionally, it has been a real struggle at points over the course of this year, and I have been in a relatively privileged position down here in Australia, and I know a lot of people within the community and around the world have lost friends and loved ones this year. So roll on 2021. I don't think everything's going to change when the clock strikes midnight on the 1st of January, but I hope that things will begin to improve and we can get back to a degree of normality by the end of the year, whatever that means. The next less than positive thing that I'm going to discuss about the watch market over the course of 2020 is what I perceive to be an increasing level of market saturation and market fatigue. I'm not suggesting the market is saturated. If it was, I'd need to find something else to do with my time, but I think it is certainly more saturated than it was this time last year, at least within the microbrand sphere as well. The microbrand community, the industry has mushroomed. It has really exploded over the last 5 years, which is great. More variety, more choice, and quite often more value to the consumer as a consequence. But I'm seeing projects not get over the line or not have the sales that perhaps the owners were expecting them to have this year. I think maybe they would have done better last year. This mainstay of Kickstarter has always been the $300 NH35 powered dive watch, and I'm seeing some pretty good $300 NH35 powered dive watches not doing well because I think we have all already got several $300 NH35 powered dive watches in our collection already. I mean, you can't just pick a design straight from a factory and expect to sell 500 units regardless of the value for money that you're offering customers. So, brand owners and prospective brand owners, here's a tip from the top for 2021. Do something different, be innovative, take risks. If you take risks, I suspect that the market will reward your risks. I think we're all looking for something different to add to the collection. We're not just looking for more of the same, regardless of how great the value equation or how great you think the value equation is. Please, I would love to hear your thoughts about this. Leave me a comment, let me know which particular areas of the market you think are saturated and what you think the market needs as a consequence. I reckon $300 dive watches, we're almost at maximum capacity. Not quite, there'll always be room for good ones, but they will have to be better than they were last year. Let's put it that way. Alright, my final 3 complaints this year are going to be about specific watches. I said this a couple of weeks ago, I don't do a lot of watch bashing on the channel here or brand bashing, I just don't do that type of content. But there have been a few pieces this year that have disappointed me for one reason or another. 2 have been on loan to the channel, one of which I paid a not inconsiderable sum of my own money for. Let's start with one of the loaners. That being the Rolex GMT Master 2. Now I was fortunate enough to get a loan of 2 of these watches over the course of 2020. First up was the Bat Person. Boy did that ruffle a few feathers, my attaching that label to the watch. That was courtesy of the guys at Clockbait channel over in the UK. I'll leave a link to their channel in the description of the video. The second GMT Master 2 that I reviewed mid-year was the Root Beer, and that was purchased by Mr. X. He actually met up with the Clockbait guys and brought their Bat Person over here, so I was able to look at that one, and then I looked at his Root Beer mid-year. Now I've reviewed a bunch of Rolex on the channel over the last few years, all of them courtesy of Mr. X, my mysterious Rolex loving friend. All the key pieces really, I've looked at the Explorer 2, the Submariner, two-tone Submariner, I've looked at a Deep Sea Sea Dweller, a couple of Deep Sea Sea Dwellers actually, and I have also looked at now 2 GMT Master 2s. Now all the previously mentioned watches I've thought were great watches if overpriced and overhyped. The GMT Master 2s though, I had a number of specific complaints about a number of quality control issues that I really felt were unbecoming of a watch at $2,000 or $3,000, certainly unbecoming of a watch at 20,000 Aussie dollars. That's the list price on the Root Beer. Wobbly bezels. I would cope with a wobbly bezel on a Pagani for less than $100, but not on a Rolex for 20 grand as discussed. Misalignment issues, noisy rotors. You know the kittens of rotor noise doom. I never thought I would be bringing them out for a Rolex review, and yet they have featured in both of those GMT Master 2 reviews. The new movement uses ceramic ball bearings and it's noisy. It seems to me that Rolex are now resting on their laurels. They're sending watches to market that probably shouldn't pass quality control for a start, but they don't care because they know that people will queue up to buy them regardless. Indeed, despite the fact that I released a overtly negative review of Mr. X's Root Beer GMT, I had a guy I know send me a message later that night trying to buy it from me. What does that say? And while I'm bashing Rolex for resting on their laurels and relying on their fan base and reputation to sell watches, I'm going to bash Seiko for exactly the same reasons. I've had a couple of quite disappointing experiences this year with the Seiko Willard reissues. I was loaned one by a subscriber and I had to be a little bit circumspect about how I treated it. Disappointing accuracy from the movement or lack of accuracy from the movement, and misalignment issues on a $1,000 watch. That's kind of cute at $250 Seiko, but it is unacceptable at $1,000, or at least it should be. Unfortunately, by the time I had that negative hands-on experience with the subscriber's watch, I had already placed an order for one myself. That duly arrived a couple of months later, and I was just as disappointed, if not more disappointed, with my metal braceleted version because I'd actually paid good money for it. Check that time grapher result. What an absolute Barry Crocker that is. Another subscriber recently suggested I should do the Seiko slap and I should give it a firm tap on the side to try and reset what was ever wrong with the movement. Again, quality control, $1,000 plus watch, non-existent. No thank you, Seiko. I will not be spending that much money on a Seiko watch again, and I would suggest that you think twice or possibly 3 times before you do the same. And finally, I make 3 videos each week, and I've been trying my hardest over the course of 2020 to follow a vague pattern of 1 bought, 1 borrowed and 1 sponsored. Nobody wants to hear the siren 3 times a week. I don't want to play the siren 3 times a week, and I've been getting a lot of pieces on loan from an ever generous Australian subscriber base. No more generous though than Ashley, my good friend over in Melbourne, who has loaned me a number of watches over the last few years. He loaned me an Alpina C-Strong this year, and I suspect he regretted it shortly after he saw the thumbnail. Good from afar, but far from good. This was my first experience with an Alpina, although I had looked at purchasing them myself on a number of occasions before. I don't think I'm going to bother. Again, this is a $999 watch, and on the surface, it's gorgeous. It's a vintage reissue of an old Alpina from the 1960s, and it is relatively faithful. But things start to go awry when you look too closely at this one. Look at those 2 crowns. They are not aligned with the indexes. The whole watch is squint, and then there is that date window. What the f*** were you thinking, Alpina? Why did you make it a trapezium rather than a rectangle? I guess you were aping the original watch, but you could have done something different. And why did you put it at 330? It just looks awful. A well done date window can make a watch. A badly done date window can break a watch. That Alpina, sadly, is broken. So there you have it, 10 minutes of gushing praise followed by 10 minutes of gripey nitpicking. Sounds like your average Joma video, doesn't it? 2020, not exactly one for the memoirs, but here we are, we've almost made it to the end, and there were indeed some watch highlights over the course of the year as discussed. Thank you again for your support, thank you for watching the channel, I look forward to seeing you all again next year.